Hi guys, in this video we will be understanding the concept of globalisation and its dimensions.
In this video, I'm going to try and give you a brief overview of what exactly globalisation is, and in the next few videos we'll be going into greater detail about the different factors of globalisation. So to begin with, what is globalisation? Well, globalisation is a process by which national economies, societies and cultures have become increasingly integrated through the global network of trade, communication, transportation and immigration. So the key points relating to this definition is that the world has become, over time, increasingly interconnected. And so now things are thought about on a more global scale, and we've created what is called a world economy. And this is because of an increase in economic and information flows. So essentially what we need to remember to define globalisation is the increasing interconnectedness of the world, connecting societies, cultures and economies through things like trade and transport and communication and immigration. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail now about how this has taken place. But firstly, as you can see on this map shows the kind of interconnections that are currently taking place across the world. We're now more interconnected with other countries than ever. So being we can send emails to people in a matter of seconds and call people by telephone and fly to different places. And hundreds of years ago, these things weren't even an option. It would take weeks or months to even reach other places on the earth. So that is essentially what globalization is. It's the world becoming more connected. Now that we've defined globalisation, we're going to look at the different dimensions of globalisation. So as I said before, currently we have an unprecedented amount of integration of world economies, and this has been happening since the 1990s, since the information technology revolution, which is when computers and all sorts started to be developed, and computers have really influenced the speed and efficiency through which we can communicate with other people across the world, especially in relation to economics. And globalization was originally only in relation to economic relationships, such as capital flows, which are flows of money between different countries, foreign direct investment, which we'll look at later on in a different video, and also international trade, which is the trading of commodities and services between countries. And this was also influenced by the opening up of the former communist trade bloc countries into the global market economy. So countries like Russia didn't used to trade with other people. Now they are part of the world economy and we all trade together. And this has really influenced globalization as well. And despite it previously only being considered in economic terms, it's now taken into account things like media, culture, social things, political, environmental and biological dimensions. Biological being things like diseases that are spread on a global level, such as things like Ebola and malaria and things like that. So as you can see, globalization takes into account a series of different factors and how they're all becoming increasingly interconnected across the world. And globalization has taken place through a variety of processes, but it's taken simply to have a process which relates to the growing uniformity shared by different places across the world and taking into account a spread of ideas and information across the world. And we can look at an example of this in terms of international brands. For example, McDonald's. McDonald's originated in the United States of America, but is now can be found in hundreds of countries across the world, or over 100 countries, with branches in lots of different places. They've adapted their menus to suit different cultures, but we still have the same branding logo, so wherever people travel across the world, they can know and recognise a McDonald's when they see one, and they can expect the same quality across the world. And this is an example of globalisation, how a brand such as McDonald's, which is called a transnational corporation, or a TNC, which we'll learn about later on, can globalise their company and make their company worldwide. So now we're going to look at the main dimensions of globalisation, starting with the economic dimension. And the economic dimension has been caused by an increase in free trade, and this is allowing countries to freely trade with each other and the removal of trade barriers. And as I said, we'll look at these factors in detail, but this video is just to give us a brief overview of what exactly globalization is and how it has happened. Another influence on economic globalization has been the growth of TNCs, such as companies like Nike and McDonald's and Apple, which are all examples of transnational corporations. Transnational corporations, very briefly, means companies that operate in different countries across the world, not just based in one country. We've also had economic globalization due to the faster and cheaper transport available, such as the development of airplanes and faster rail networks, and also through global marketing, where brands can market their products on a global stage. And economic globalization is characterized by long-distance flows of goods, capital and services, information and market exchanges. So previously, these sorts of things like goods and capital and services would have only been traded within a country because, they could only reach those certain places. But now the world market has been opened up, and through travel and trade, these services and products can be traded on a global level. Secondly, we have cultural and social globalization, and this has primarily been caused by migration. So this is people moving across borders and away from their countries, not only across borders but also within countries, and spreading messages and information and things like that. And we have the influence of the global communications networks, so things like the internet and social media, all spreading ideas and languages and culture across the world at an unprecedented level than ever before, because in the past the internet didn't exist. And we've also seen the impact of Western culture. So Western culture has been spread more across the world because now places that didn't have access to the internet before are now being influenced by Western culture, such as through media, sport, celebrities and leisure. And cultural and social globalization is characterized by the spread of ideas, information and images. And finally, we have political globalization, and this is caused by the growth of Western democracies. These are the more developed countries in the Western world, such as North America, Canada, Europe, those countries, and they're having a greater influence on the poorer countries of the world, such as those in sub-Saharan Africa. And we've also seen a decline of the communist economies, such as Russia and China, and their integration into the world market and so on has had a great influence on globalization. And this political globalization has been characterized by the diffusion of government policy across the world, and also the development of market economies in former communist states such as Russia and China. So finally, I'm going to give it a brief introduction to factors of production in globalization, which are land, labour, capital and enterprise. So land relates to the natural resources provided by the earth, including things like minerals, soils, water, forests, for example. Labour is human resources, so it's the human capital available to work in a workforce and produce things like goods and services. Then we have capital, and this is, in economic terms, any physical resource that can be regarded as man-made aid for production, such as buildings, factories, physical money, machinery, for example. And finally, enterprise is a very particular form of human capital and relates to these particular people that take risks and develop businesses. So these are our factors of production of globalization.
Hi guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're looking for an amazing A-level geography resource, join me today in my series of engaging bite-sized video tutorials. See you soon, and together let's make A-level geography a walk in the park.